The Sharks have a ton of draft ammo heading into the 2024 NHL Draft. How far up can they go, and who could they be targeting?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, probably part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be looking at who could the Sharks be targeting as they potentially try to trade up? How far could they actually go with all the draft capital that they could be that they do have in hand, at least heading into the draft lottery? And then realistic teams to trade for, and again, realistic targets to trade for. So before we get into all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist of the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. So I've been asked this question. This and was Will Smith signing are the two questions I have been asked the most, basically, since the Sharks off season has started. And one, we're still waiting on Will Smith news, but two is, can the Sharks trade up, and what would that realistically look like for the Sharks to try to move up from the number, what's projected to be the number 14 pick again? This, by the time next week when we actually have the NHL draft lottery, this could all be blown up, because if Pittsburgh wins the lottery and moves up, this conversation could be null and void. But I wanted to have it now while we still have the potential, and it's still a very, very small chance that Pittsburgh could move up. But so let's start out with kind of looking at, when you go into this, you have to kind of look at pick values and what does each pick actually, what's it worth, and what happens when you combine picks together, how far can you move up? So Sound of Hockey, who covers the Kraken, I don't know, a couple years ago, they put out this trade value chart. So basically it assigns every pick 1 through 224, right? 32 picks around, 7 rounds. And they assigned a pick value where if you have the first pick in the draft, it is worth 1,000 points, or whatever you want to use as your metric. But all the way down to the 224th pick in the draft, which is worth 0.10 points. So every pick has a value, right? And you see how it exponentially decreases, right? So pick number 1, 1,000 picks. Pick number 2, so the second pick in the draft, right? Very valuable pick, 726.59. Pick number 3, 602.54. 531.65 for pick number 4, 484.40. So you can see, like, picks 4 and 5 basically combine to equal the first pick in the draft. So if you had picks 4 and 5 and you wanted to trade up to the number 1 overall pick, that's basically what it would cost you. So it goes on down and down all the way to, so just to put in perspective, pick 32 in the draft, first round pick, 132.71 points. So 13% the value of the first overall pick in the draft. Things kind of level off, right? And, as you kind of go through it. But again, it shows the importance of how huge having the first overall pick in the draft is, and kind of where it slots out. And as you get further away, the picks become less and less value and kind of clump together more, right? Where, if you're looking at picks, in the 5th round, the first pick in the 5th round is worth 4.65 points. And the last pick in the 5th round is worth 2.91 points. So it's basically like a 1.5 difference between, anywhere in the 5th round pick there. So again, just how important that first one is and just kind of how it tails off there. So, I think the big question then is, well, how much capital do the Sharks actually have in the draft? So again, looking at where we're kind of, some of these we aren't finalized, right? Of course, with the draft lottery, wherever, that the Sharks end up picking there. But going into the draft lottery, this is kind of where the Sharks are at. And keep in mind, some of these picks are still going to change. Like the 85th overall pick, which is the pick that Sharks got from Tampa from the Anthony Duclair trade. That might alter. I know they're playing, game right now. That could change a little bit. Same thing with the 4th round pick from Vegas, which is 116th overall. Some of these picks might fluctuate a little bit here and there, just based on where a team finishes in the, kind of finishes their season in the playoffs. But it should still, right, as we mentioned, right, some of these, it's not much of a decrease between here and there. So, okay, the 1st overall pick, 14th overall pick, 33rd, 42nd, 85th, 116th, 131, 143, 194. So if you add all those picks up, the Sharks have 1,545.16 points of draft capital. Last year, Sharks also had 2 first-round picks, right? They had their own pick at number 4. They had the New Jersey pick, which ended up being 26th. And, they had a bunch of picks that they had accumulated. They were in the 800 range. So that just, again, shows you how important that first overall pick is for San Jose this year. Again, hoping that you can win, you can win the draft lottery. Like the Sharks could add every pick other than the first overall pick, and it wouldn't equal to the value of the first. That's how important it is. And yes, not every first round pick, like last year's first round pick of getting Connor Bedard, way more important than the 20, was it the 2020, whenever Owen Power went, right? Owen Power seems like he's gonna be a good player. Not as good as Connor Bedard, but still, you have to kind of level it out at an even playing field here. So, and Macklin Celebrini, not as good as Connor Bedard, but still, I think the Athletic kind of had a where they ranked the top 9 first overall picks over the last couple of seasons. And Macklin Celebrini, I think, was like 4th or 5th. Like you would definitely want Macklin Celebrini. It's not like you're getting a bad player. Like Macklin Celebrini is going to be he's a franchise changing player. Maybe not a generational player like Connor Bedard, but the reason why those guys are generational players happen once in a generation, while a franchise changing player is more often. So you have to kind of, again, slot those through. So, but overall, heading into the draft, the Sharks have a lot of draft capital, even if they don't get the first overall pick and that bumps down to the 2nd overall pick, or God forbid, the 3rd overall pick. The Sharks are still going to have a ton of draft capital in this year, especially, and that's weighted because of having their own first overall pick, which is their own first round pick, which is going to be, top 3, right? You're getting the Penguins pick, assuming they don't win the draft lottery and move up. And even if they do, there's still a very, very small chance that they might still give it to the Sharks. I would assume they would probably then just kick the 2025 pick to the Sharks, which is unprotected. The 33rd overall pick, which is the Sharks' own pick, worth 126.9 points. And then the Sharks pick that they got from the Devils and the Timo Meier trade, 85.3. So you can see how much those picks are kind of pulling the weight there, right? And then the 85th overall pick, which is worth 19.15 points. The 116th pick, which is 4th round, 20th overall. Nice. 7.11 points. 5th round pick, 4.42. That's their own pick at 503. 515 at 366. That is from the Penguins, part of the Nick Bonino trade. And then 702, 194th overall pick, which is 141. Actually, excuse me. I think that top of the 3rd was a Blackhawks pick from some convoluted trade. But anyway, still very high pick in that one. So plenty of draft capital for these Sharks to do whatever we want. So how far up can the Sharks actually move, and do we have any historic trades? So we're going to dig into that next. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. And Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel aboard with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton of including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, massive multipliers for everything to win. You can win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. And as I'm recording this, it looks like Tampa has lost. So, so it looks like that pick probably going to be right around there for 85th overall for the Sharks. So might change a spot or two. Not going to dig into that right now. Anyway, still mid third round pick for the Sharks there from the Anthony Duclair trade. So, but yeah, back to the big question is then, well, like, have we seen a trade from a team outside the top 10 move into the top 10 at the draft, not including players, right? The Sharks don't really have a lot of players worth trading or that they want to trade, right? That are worth a top 10 pick. Like we saw, for example, like Alex DeBrincat got traded to the Sens for the 7th overall pick a couple of seasons ago, but that was a player for a pick conversation. And we will have conversations about that potential trade later on this offseason. But you have to go back pretty far to a well-known name for Sharks. 2007, the Sharks traded with the St. Louis Blues. They traded the 13th pick, the 44th pick, which was a second round pick in the 2007 draft, and then a third round pick in the 2008 draft, which would end up being 87th overall, to move up from 13 to 9 to draft Logan Couture. I think that trade worked out for the Sharks. And the Blues in that trade also got Ian Schultz, Lars Eller, and Aaron Polej. Sorry if I butchered your name. Looking at just the values of the picks, like the Blues won this trade, if you kind of add all the numbers up, a little bit different because less picks back in the day when they only had 30 teams, et cetera, et cetera. But still, looking at it, the Blues won the trade. Looking at it, what are we, almost 20 years later, the Sharks won that trade, right? You got Logan Couture, who is the better player out of all these players. So Sharks would do that trade 1,000 times out of 1,000. So because you got Logan Couture, who ended up, has played a bajillion games for you, was a huge part of your core going to, Stanley Cup, et cetera, et cetera. So Sharks definitely won that trade. But that's it, right? This is not something that happens a lot for teams. Teams outside of the top 10 moving into the top 10 during draft day trades. So if Mike Grier is able to pull this off, it's going to be a bit rare. So how far up can we go? All right, 3 different trade up scenarios involving the 14th overall pick. You trade the whole farm. Pick 14, pick 33, pick 42. That combines for 509.41 points. The 5th pick in the draft is 484.4 points. So you're looking at trading with the Montreal Canadiens, right? Because like we saw before, the other team is going to want to, quote unquote, win the trade. You're a little bit, you'd have probably to throw something else in there if you wanted to try to move up with the Columbus Blue Jackets, who again, sitting 4th right now. But pick number 5 would be the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll talk about these scenarios a little bit more. I just want to, again, kind of give you a layout where they would be. 114, 14th overall and the 33rd overall. If you just want to combine those two picks, that's worth 424.03 points. The 7th pick in the draft is worth 419.42. So it's a pretty even trade right there. I would still assume you might have to throw something small in there, whether it's a 5th round pick, whatever, maybe just to kind of bump it over the edge a little bit. But that pick is currently owned by the Ottawa Senators. The 8th pick in the draft. So if you wanted to trade 14th overall for plus 42nd overall, the Devils pick, is worth 382.51 points. The 8th pick in the draft is worth 395.79. So maybe not quite enough there, but you're still like in the ballpark for that one. And that is currently owned by the Seattle Kraken. So there's kind of the early math of how far up you could potentially trade with you. So you're looking at the 5th overall pick, the 7th, and the 8th, if you're depending on which parts you want to package. Just say maybe you just want a 3rd round, an extra 1st round pick, and you don't want to trade. You don't want to trade away the 14th overall pick, because like we've heard from our friends, it kind of plateaus around 15, and then you kind of start to see maybe a little bit of a drop off. But maybe you're like, you know what? I don't want a 2nd round pick. I want 2 1st round picks or I want 3 1st round picks. What can I get from that? So if you traded 33 and 42 overall, that would equal 212 points. The 22nd pick in the draft is worth 208. Still hasn't been determined, but I think as of right now, by Tankathon, that would be Nashville's pick. Again, we'll see how things kind of shake out here but again, that would give you potentially 14 and 22 if you just wanted to trade up with the 2nd round, package the 2nd round picks and kind of see where you are at. So the Sharks have plenty of potential options here to trade up. Again, if Mike Grier wants to do that. The thing is, though, we just don't see it very often because these top 10 picks are such a precious commodity, right? No GM wants to kind of be the guy who gave up on a potential top 10, gave up on the right to draft a potential top pick. So you can move down and get some guys in, especially in a draft like this, where it feels like it's very much a top heavy, like we know Celebrini, and then it's kind of a cluster between 2 and 15 of guys, and just is going to be very much who you want. So maybe that works out for the Sharks, where there's such a small degree of separation between, like, it's not like last year, right? We had kind of your top 3 with Celebrini, Fantilli, and Erik Karlsson, and then Will Smith. Like, you had kind of that next tier with like Will Smith leading the way and Ryan Leonard, like, et cetera, et cetera. This year kind of feels like that it's Celebrini. Again, everybody I've talked to about on this pod, where it's Celebrini, maybe Demidov, but again, right, Russian factor, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's very much a cluster of, well, I like this guy a little bit more than I like this guy. And then you talk to another person, like, oh, I don't like that guy as much. Like, maybe that plays in the Sharks' favor, where if they love a guy, we'll talk about potential guys that they might love, that would make sense to trade up for. Then maybe that's where it's like, you know what, we'll just move back a little bit, give us some more ammo to go do something else. So let's talk about that. Let's look at some potential scenarios here in just 1 second. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. Again, There's no defense in the Avs in the Colorado Winnipeg series. Just keep betting the over on that, and you'll probably have a good time. So all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. So that begs the question: who are you trading with, and who are you targeting here? So I think let's kind of walk through the teams that we kind of that 5 through 10. We'll start with the Canadians, who, right, if you wanted to trade the farm by the farm, 14, 32, 42, 14, 33, 42. If you want to trade all that, try to move up to Montreal. Maybe Montreal would be intrigued, but I think Montreal is kind of in the same spot as the Sharks, where they've been selling off pieces for a while. They've gotten a lot of picks. They also have they have a pick at the end of the first round that belongs to Winnipeg. They're probably like, we need quality over quantity right now. We feel pretty good about our defensemen, but we need a game-changing forward, and whether that's Lindstrom or Yzerman or Demina, like whoever it is. Like I feel like that's where Montreal is kind of at. So doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And talking to Scott over at Locked On Canadians, he is kind of in the same boat. Arizona/Utah. I think they are going to be aggressive with a new owner. And while maybe trading back might make sense, they've also accumulated 1,000 second-round picks. I think they have 3. They do have 3 in this upcoming draft, second-round picks. So for them, adding 2 more doesn't, again, you have a stockpile of these second-round picks, and maybe you just take all 5 and you can move back up into the first round if you wanted to. As we saw them do a couple years ago with Beasted, moving from the end of the first round up to 11, and maybe that's something that they would definitely look into. But again, they have a lot of ammo right now, so it doesn't make too much sense. Ottawa, who is, I think, they need to start winning NHL games here. And maybe they kind of do like they did a couple years ago, where they look to trade a first-round pick for an NHL, someone who can contribute right now, type of player. And maybe for them, it's like, hey, what if we move down 7 spots, right, from 7 to 14? We pick up some extra stuff, whether it's one second-round pick plus something else, and then we turn around and flip that for a player. And I think for them, potentially looking at trading pick number 14 versus pick number 7 for an NHL player, like that might make a little bit more sense for them. So Ottawa is a team I'm targeting to try to trade with, try to move up for. Seattle is, I know they just fired their coach. They are also kind of in the, we need just good players mode, but that team is kind of, I think, a little bit more analytically driven. And for them, potentially taking more swings at the bat would make sense, right? Move back a couple slots, especially if this whole middle pack is very, right, as I mentioned before, it's kind of this creamy middle between kind of 3 and 15. And for them, maybe there's just not that much of a great difference between the guy they have ranked 8th and the guy they have ranked 14th. And then you get to pick up some extra assets on the way. So they're another potential trade target. The next one is Calgary. So Calgary would make a lot of sense in one way, because they're kind of starting their rebuild or retool or whatever they want to call it. But again, they've been very aggressive in acquiring picks as well, because they have number 9. They have a number 29 that they got from Vancouver this year. They have their own second-round pick, and then they have Dallas's pick. Like, they have a fair amount of stuff there as well. And maybe for them, they just kind of just acquire as much as possible. But again, I don't know if this is full rebuild or retool with them. So they're kind of a team to keep an eye on. And then number 10, of course, is New Jersey, which I think would be hilarious to trade their own pick back to them because they don't have it, right? They traded part of the Timo Meier trade. But they're also in a kind of like the Senators where we need to start winning games here because we have a young core and like, right, we don't want to have the 22-23 season be a flash in the pan. They took a huge step back this season, and right, you expect them to maybe hopefully start to contend here soon rather than later. So maybe they're aggressive, kind of like the Sens were. Let's try to add a veteran type of piece. So we'll see what they kind of do. But who are you targeting? Of course, is the big question. So I have made my case for Zeke Bouillon. I think he's the best defenseman in the draft class so far. He would be a guy I definitely target. I know he's a left-handed defenseman, but like you go watch that national championship game, and I know it's one game and one game shouldn't, but he can defend, he can create offense. He is a guy I am willing to risk it all for if I'm him. And I think if you're a Sharks fan and you want to get like that blue chip defensive player, and whether you like Levshinov, whether you like Dickinson or Silyev, whoever you like, your hope is, to be honest, your hope is Demidov goes early, right? You hope it's kind of maybe a little bit forward heavy to begin with, whether it's Celebrini and then Demidov and then Lindstrom, and then maybe Cole Eiserman goes a little. Like you want those forwards to kind of push up, maybe go a little bit forward. And again, right, it's such a hodgepodge of rankings between kind of that 2 through 15. That you're hoping some of these forwards go a little bit more. And then you start to see some of those defensemen slip. Like I said, whether it's like a Dickinson, whether it's a Zeke Bouillon, Silyev, whoever you want, and maybe they slip a little bit, and then that's where you kind of you pull the trigger. So if you're a Sharks fan looking for that blue, and that I think there's a lot of questions with a lot of these defensemen, right? But one of them is going to hit. Like the odds say that at least one of them is going to be good, right? Maybe not like top pairing, like game changing defenseman, but still a very, very good. Like whoever the Sharks draft, if the Sharks do draft someone at defense, they're going to be the best Sharks defenseman in the prospect pool. Like they're going to jump Shakir Mukhamadullin. Like I like any of those guys I mentioned, I would probably put ahead of Shakir Mukhamadullin kind of based on their upside. I still think Shakir Mukhamadullin is going to be a great player. I think he's probably tops out as a low end 2, right? If you have your 6 defenseman, like a low end 2, high end 3. So kind of a really high end second pairing guy, or, kind of a low end, maybe not the guy on the first pairing. So, but I think a guy like Zeke Bouillon, I think he can be a number 1 defenseman, right? Dickinson, I know he has some of his issues, but he's been playing really well in the playoffs. And I think the tools are there for him to be, kind of maybe in the same boat as like a Mukhamadullin. But again, you never know with where the development will take you. So, I'm to kind of end things here. I'm very much in the keep your options open, but I would, if a guy starts to slide, like if Zeke Bouillon starts to slide past like 6 or 7, I am doing what it takes to get up to get a guy like Zeke Bouillon. And yes, I know the Sharks still have a bunch of holes in their prospect pool, but I'm in the quality over quantity mindset. You have 4 picks in the top 42. I want to walk away here with 2 guys where I feel like they're going to be game-changing type of players. And I think Zeke Bouillon is that defenseman for me. So if you walk away with potentially Macklin Celebrini and Zeke Bouillon in this draft, I honestly don't care what else you do. Like that's an A+ draft for me right there, because I think you got the 2 best guys at their positions right there. So I am, again, if one of those guys starts to slide a little bit, and maybe, GMs Yes, I know Zeke Williams had a great championship game, but GMs love themselves tall, right-handed defensemen. And yeah, you hope that some of maybe those bigger defensemen kind of go a little bit. And a guy like Zeke Williams, who we've seen perform on some big stages, slides just a little bit there, and then Mike Grier can kind of take advantage of it. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be doing another kind of season review on a pretty well-known Sharks player. So we'll get into that. We got more draft profiles coming this week. And then, of course, next week we have the draft lottery. So we'll get you guys ready for that. Have reactions to that after the draft lottery. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And, of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. You can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.